Illustrator lets you do very fine detailed work, so they let you zoom in very closely on your artwork, and of course you have to be able to zoom out. You might be working in just maybe a few pixels distance here and there, or maybe you're editing a billboard and you've got 20 or 30 feet to look at on your screen. So it's very important to know how to zoom in, how to zoom out, and how to move around in a document when you're using it. If you still have the file open from the previous lesson, you can continue with it, or you could open up my version. I have the file open called PLP Logo. You'll find it in the Chapter 1 folder of the project files. And I have some colors over here. Ignore them. We're not going to deal with colors in this lesson. So let me start by showing you kind of a standard basic way of zooming in. And you see over here down towards the bottom of the tools you have this magnifying glass. The shortcut is Z. So you could just click that, or Z if you're British or Canadian. And you see the mouse pointer turns to a magnifying glass with a plus sign in it. And there's a couple of ways you could do this. Just maybe click. Let's say if I want to zoom in over here on the upper left edge, just click and it zooms in. And wherever you click, it zooms in on that spot. You can zoom out incrementally the same way that you zoom in, and that is in Windows, hold down the Alt key. On the Mac, hold down the Option key. And when you do that, you notice that a little minus sign goes in that magnifying glass, and now when you click, you zoom out pretty much the same way that you zoomed in. I don't really like that method very much because you see I'm not really zooming out on anything useful. I'd really prefer to have this document, let's say, fit in window, and you can press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to fit in window. I showed this in a previous lesson. You could also double-click the hand tool. Now maybe you want to see this not fit in window, but you want to see, let's say, 100% view, that is actual size. Two ways you could do that is double-click the zoom tool, and when you do that, you see up here it tells you you're at 100%. Also down here at the bottom tells you you're at 100%, and the keyboard shortcut for that predictably is Control, or on the Mac, Command-1. But let me show you another way that you could use this little plus in the magnifying glass, and that is maybe I want to zoom in on this area here. Put your mouse pointer right about over there, and instead of just clicking and releasing, click and drag like this so you draw a box. And now when you let go, you've zoomed in on that area. And again, I'll press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to get back out. But what's really nice is that you don't really need the zoom tool to zoom in and out. Let's go back to get the regular selection tool. And you can see the shortcut there is V. And if you're used to Photoshop, it's pretty much the same tool. So if you hit V in Photoshop, you get the Move tool. Here in Illustrator, you get the regular selection tool. So how can you zoom in and out without actually using the zoom tool? Well, one way is simple keyboard shortcut, and that is press Control+, or on the Mac, Command+, and you zoom in a little bit. And take a look up here on the little tab. Every time that I press Control+ or Command+, I go in another 100%. You could probably guess pressing Command- or Control- in Windows will zoom back out incrementally 100% at a time. And again, I'll press Control-0. There's some smoother ways of doing that. And again, let's say we want to zoom in on that area. Put your mouse pointer there, and now hold down the Alt key in Windows or the Option key on the Mac, and roll the mouse wheel away from you, and that lets you zoom in. And to zoom out, just the opposite. Hold down the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and roll the wheel back towards you. Now, if you're using a Magic Mouse on a Macintosh, and you just sort of slide your finger back and forth on there, which direction you need to go depends on which version of OS X you're using. So you'll figure that out pretty quickly. And also, speaking of which, if you are using a MacBook or MacBook Air, so you have the trackpad, or maybe you've got a regular Mac and you have the external trackpad, you can pinch your fingers inwards or spread your fingers outwards also to zoom in and out. And also, speaking of the Mac, when I showed you here before that I held down the Alt key and used the wheel to roll in and out, currently there's a bit of a bug on the Mac, so Option rolling may not work. Now, by the time you watch this lesson, they may have fixed that bug, but that's what's happening right now. And again, I'll press Control 0 or Command 0 to get out full screen. And I showed you before that you can click the zoom tool and then kind of drag over an area you want to zoom in on. Now, let's say you're doing some work, maybe you're coloring or maybe you're using one of these paintbrushes or something, and you want to zoom in on an area. Rather than switching these tools back and forth, here's another nice little shortcut you can use. And that is, see right now I have just the regular selection tool. I'll put my mouse pointer over here. I'm going to hold down the Control key and the space bar, or on the Mac, hold down the Command key and the space bar. And when you do that, you notice that the mouse button just kind of becomes that zoom tool. Now, I'm not clicking anything, so I'm not actually zooming. I just have the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and the space bar held down. When I let go of the keys, that zoom button goes away. Now, try that again, and you see when you've got that mouse pointer, keep your fingers down on the keyboard, and with the other hand, drag a box, just like you did before. And when you do this, you always want to let go of the mouse first before letting go of the keys. And now you see you've zoomed in on that area. And the advantage to doing this is that I don't have to keep switching back and forth between the tools. So let's say I was using the selection tool. I'm still on the selection tool. As soon as I release my fingers from the keyboard, I don't have to keep going back to that zoom tool over and over again. Now let's stay zoomed in here. Don't zoom out just yet. Let's say that I want to get to the right side of this artwork. You might say, okay, well, that's fine. I have the little scroll bar down here and I can do that. But you say that's kind of hard to control, especially if you're zoomed in very closely. You can use the grabber hand, and a couple of ways to do that. Here's the grabber hand on the toolbar. Click that, and it's kind of like you can put your hand on the screen and yank it around. So as long as you have that grabber hand, you can now very gently scroll left, right, up, down, crosswise, however you want it. And as you're doing that, you notice that the scroll bars, the horizontal and the vertical scroll bars, are moving. So that's just an easier way of using the scroll bars. Now, just like with the magnifying glass, there is a keyboard shortcut for that. Again, let's go and get the selection tool back, or you could click one of the other tools, doesn't really matter. Maybe I'll click the ellipse tool just to show you this works. Hold down the space bar by itself. And when you hold down the space bar, you notice that grabber hand appears. So right now I have the ellipse tool selected, or it doesn't matter whichever tool you have selected. As long as I hold the space bar down, I temporarily get the hand, and then when I click and drag, I can move around, and then as soon as I let go of the space bar, I have that whatever tool it is that I have selected. I get it back again. Now you might wonder, okay, but what if I'm editing text? Let's kind of drag up here a little bit. We'll talk about text in detail later on, but just get the type tool, and it doesn't matter what font you have, what color, it doesn't matter. Just click in there, and I'll just type the word scrolling around. Now, in previous versions of Illustrator, if you were editing type and you wanted the grabber hand, you had no choice. You had to go and click the grabber hand, because what happens when you're editing type and you hold down the space bar? You get a whole lot of spaces there, don't you? That's just backspace over those. Well, starting with this version of Illustrator, now when you're editing type and you want a shortcut for the grabber hand, just hold down the Alt key, just the Alt key by itself, or on the Mac, hold down the Option key by itself. And now you can drag around, and then when you let go of the key, you have your type tool back. So there is no right way or wrong way to zoom and scroll around, but you should know what your options are, because different times you want to use different techniques.